Hi folks, Florida Man here. Today I'm bringing you an after-action report on a game I played on playdiplomacy.com. It was the Escalation version of Diplomacy on the classic map. Escalation means that each player takes turns selecting where his or her units will initially be placed, and after that, you play a year, then select your home centers in the build phase. Those are the most important details, although the full set of rules will be linked in the description to this video. The other interesting thing about this variant is that it can accommodate various numbers of players, which on Play Diplomacy ranges up to 11. In this game, though, we played with the normal number of 7, so I won't be commenting on that rule change very much. I was selected to play the green power, known as Foch, spelled F-O-C-H, while other players were assigned to play as Ataturk, Haig, Patton, Nimitz, Zhukov, and Slim. I think the renaming of the powers makes great sense when you consider that there was no geographic relationship to the original 7 powers of diplomacy. With the unit placement phase, my goal was to acquire centers that would allow me to dominate a corner of the map immediately. I figured the strongest corner to dominate that would give me the most power eventually was probably the corner that typically belongs to Turkey. Zhukov seemed to have a similar idea to me, but he chose to take over the English island and the North Sea instead. Slim and Patton both seemed to have a similar idea as well, but unfortunately they chose to fight over the same corner, the French and Iberian regions. Nimitz chose to basically start off as Germany, while Haig took Moscow, Norway, and Denmark, setting up to dominate the northernmost regions of the map, which I think is a pretty clever way to play this. Unfortunately for me, Ataturk decided to compete for some of the same real estate as myself, although I think he made some mistakes in where he chose to place his units, in Trieste, Serbia, and Naples. The main mistake there was that he was not going to have the same level of flexibility I had, with my units spaced out for maximum expansion opportunity. At the same time, his unit in Naples was too far away to meaningfully help his other units if they came under, say, an attack from me. From the very beginning, Ataturk and I don't see eye to eye. He tries to go for Bulgaria at the same time as me, which, it should be obvious, was going to be a strategic problem for me. The only thing keeping me from confidently pouncing on him immediately after this was the thought that Haig, who had moved his Moscow unit south, might join forces with Ataturk. However, Haig reassured me he had no such intentions, freeing me up to attack Ataturk without reservations in the fall. I figured I would quickly bulldoze Ataturk, and that would form the foundation for a southeastern empire that would gradually dominate the map. I tried to make connections with other powers, but Nimitz seemed too far away to exert influence, and although Haig seemed friendly, there was no way he could be of help to me in fighting Ataturk, since I was between them. Patton seemed more concerned with Slim, and it seemed inevitable that they would be stuck fighting each other for a while before either of them could devote any forces to intervening in any other area of the map. And indeed, Slim and Patton directed their very first moves at attacking each other directly, meaning both of their openings were somewhat ineffective, while Zhukov positioned to attack Haig in Scandinavia, and Nimitz moved so as to double in size in the first year. In fall 1901, Nimitz's gambit was successful, and he ballooned up to 6 centers. Ataturk and I continued to clash in the Balkans, because he decided to go for Budapest at the same time as me, and at the same time I took Serbia from him, resulting in him only increasing to 4 centers, while Haig and I, his neighbors, increased to 5 centers each. Patton and Slim continued to clash fruitlessly, resulting in their being the weakest 2 powers by the year's end, holding constant at 3 centers each. Zhukov climbed to 4 centers, but he was only able to do it by attacking Haig, which given Haig's early strength seemed to me a Pyrrhic victory at best. With the build phase, Haig acquired a new Moscow army, Nimitz acquired 2 new armies in Germany, Zhukov built a new fleet, Ataturk built an army in Trieste, and I built an army and fleet. Slim and Patton remained constant. In spring 1902, Haig and I discussed our proximity to each other again, and Haig gave me a sense of comfort that he wasn't likely to be an enemy. Ataturk and I remained at odds, so I attacked him in Trieste, and he attacked me in Serbia. Unfortunately for me, Nimitz moved south, occupying Bohemia and Galicia. It seemed Ataturk had an ally I hadn't counted on, and the neutrality I thought I'd secured from Haig wouldn't be particularly valuable if the big 800-pound gorilla in the room, Nimitz, decided to support Ataturk. In the west, Haig started to counterattack against Zhukov, as I'd expected. Slim and Patton continued to tangle unconstructively as well. I retreated to Romania, resolved to put up a fight that would be disproportionate to my size, regardless of however many neighbors allied against me. In fall 1902, I took Greece from Ataturk and lost Bulgaria to him. I also retook Serbia, which was a net win for me. The really annoying thing was losing Vienna to Nimitz, which was seemingly pure opportunism on his part. Surely Ataturk hadn't done anything to endear himself to Nimitz so much that there was really a good reason for them to join forces against me. But Nimitz moved his other army south into Tyrolia, so he could commit more to the fight rather than less. Nimitz also seemed to move against Zhukov in the north, which in retrospect seems to have been the beginning of a relationship between Nimitz and Haig, who was still sparring with Zhukov in that region. Very little happened between Slim and Patton besides a very important retreat, which landed in North Africa. In the build phase I got a fleet in Constantinople, but fatally for me, Haig also built a fleet in Sevastopol, indicating my probable doom. Nimitz was confident enough of his position in the southeast and center of the map that he built a fleet in Belgium rather than any more armies. Ataturk built a new fleet too, surely hoping that he and Nimitz could accomplish with numbers what he had failed to achieve with tactics in the previous year. In spring 1903, I took Bulgaria back from Ataturk, and I held my own elsewhere, but it was very apparent that all of my neighbors were gearing up to fight me. Haig supported Nimitz into Galicia, and Haig also tried to move into Black Sea, although I bounced that, while Ataturk moved into Ionian Sea. What had I ever done to offend them? To the west, Patton moved into Tunisia, but his other units tried to attack Nimitz, forcing Nimitz's Tyrolia army to bounce and move into Munich. Slim surprisingly moved his units away from the front with Patton, toward attacking either Zhukov or Nimitz. Zhukov turtled up as best as he could on the English island, apparently aware he was in some trouble. In the fall, Slim and Patton worked together to attack Nimitz and support Zhukov against him. Zhukov was able to retake North Sea from Nimitz. I held on to Bulgaria and took the neutral center of Smyrna, but I also lost Constantinople and Budapest to Ataturk and Nimitz respectively, putting me in a difficult position that looked likely to grow increasingly untenable. With spring 1904, I continued to fight the three of them, and I regained Budapest and Constantinople while losing Trieste. Unfortunately, this was the spring, and Ataturk was able to retreat into Aegean Sea, and in fall, Ataturk snuck into Smyrna while Haig pulled into Armenia and held on to Ankara. Nimitz and Ataturk retained Vienna and Trieste too, leaving me in control of a tightly contained geographic area surrounded by enemy units. If I had a plan to flip one of these people on the others, I would feel alright about this position, but they are tightly unified. And Ataturk in particular is downright gleeful about the success of his effort to get Nimitz and Haig to come down on me. I appear to be the black sheep of the East, despite my being the basically nicest guy in the world to everyone who wasn't Ataturk. The only bright side is that Patton and Slim are fighting Nimitz, and Patton moved to surround Munich this season, even as Nimitz attacked Paris. With all the different people Nimitz is fighting, he should be outnumbered by all the people who he's got on edge. Hopefully I'll survive long enough to benefit from their effort to balance things out. In the build phase, all my enemies get new units, while I have no home center available to build in, so I hold constant. None of my potential saviors in the west has a build either, unfortunately. With spring 1905, Nimitz takes Budapest from me. Ataturk supports him in, convoys an army into Albania and vacates Smyrna, allowing Haig to capture the center. It's as if the only thing that matters to Ataturk is defeating me, not growing at all. On the bright side, Patton and Slim are really giving Nimitz a fight for his life in the west, taking back Paris and capturing Munich, which Nimitz has no immediate prospect for retaking. At the same time, though, Slim attacked Zhukov, reducing the apparent opposition to Nimitz by weakening Zhukov, who was in a position to have no choice but to fight Nimitz until now. In fall 1905, Nimitz and Ataturk take Romania and Greece from me, reducing me to Serbia, Bulgaria, and Constantinople. Interestingly, they also support Patton in taking Smyrna, taking that away from Haig. Perhaps that's a glimmer of hope? There's been no gap in the solidarity between these powers until now. I don't feel much optimism here, though. Since I'm already reduced to 3 very badly positioned centers, I'm not sure how I would come back from this, even if they all turned on each other right now. It doesn't help that Nimitz and Ataturk, my primary oppressors, are still holding steady in their other territories. Nimitz acquired Marseille and Spain to make up for losing ground in Germany, and Ataturk is not being attacked by anyone at all. Zhukov is reduced to a single center, so at least I'm doing better than him. In the build phase, Slim gets a new fleet while Haig gets an army. I'm hopeful that Haig's army indicates the intent to go after his big land neighbor, Nimitz. Unfortunately, I think it's unlikely Slim's fleet will go after Nimitz or Ataturk, because it's just not very conveniently placed, and an army probably would have been better for that. In spring 1906, Ataturk and Nimitz continue to attack me, while Haig has done nothing to attack Nimitz, and seems to just be positioning to ensure he gets Smyrna. Very modest ambitions from Haig, I think. Arguably part of a pattern, so far, from him. Nimitz's scattered position is very vulnerable right now to a backstab from him specifically, but I guess Haig doesn't see it or doesn't have the ambition to cross the stalemate line in Germany. Patton and Slim are still struggling against Nimitz in the west, but they seem a little bit feeble. Nothing really happens this season but repositioning. It's the same modest effectiveness they've had all game. In fall 1906, however, Patton takes Spain, Marseille, and Berlin, which brings him back to strategic relevance on the broad map. Nimitz remains spread too thinly, and Ataturk seems to be attacking him too, walking into Vienna this season. Haig finally attacks Nimitz, forcing his way into Romania. I am reduced to Constantinople at this point, so I don't much care what happens with Nimitz and Ataturk now. I begin renewing my acquaintance with Haig, however. I anticipate that talking with him and developing a relationship may at least keep me alive, and if I'm alive, I always have the possibility of recovery. In spring 1907, I successfully get Haig to support me holding in Constantinople. Elsewhere, he continues to go after Nimitz, as do Ataturk and Slim. The precarious alliances that had allowed Nimitz to be a continent-spanning power for a big chunk of the game, and to attack me while also fighting in France and England, are falling apart, and everyone is dividing up Nimitz. I can't take much joy in it, though. It happened much later than I hoped, and long after I tried to make it happen through diplomatic means, and it's probably too late to rescue me as a power. Ataturk won't be destroyed with Nimitz either, I expect, so I'll still have at least one devoted enemy. In fall 1907, Haig can't support me because he's attempting to reposition. Probably to absorb me, honestly, but if so, I can't do anything about it, so it's not worth worrying about. Fortunately, Patton does support me with his lone unit in Smyrna. Ataturk also doesn't attack me this season, perhaps waiting for the right time, or forgetting about me now that I'm weak. The build phase is a time of constructing new armies rather than fleets, which signals what's about to happen. Treachery might be afoot in the west, and Ataturk plans to remain in the east and expand there rather than interfering in the combat in the west. Spring 1908, Slim takes Paris from Patton, and he also helps finish Nimitz off. Never has a once dominant power declined more rapidly than Nimitz. It goes to show the danger of getting into a two-front war, or in his case, perhaps a three-front war. Also pleasant is the fact that both Nimitz and Patton are supporting me to hold in Constantinople now, and Haig is pulling his army from Armenia up into Sevastopol. What this means is that I should last a while longer, not just this year, but probably another, based on the goodwill of my conquerors. With luck, the next fight will be between Ataturk and Haig. If that happens, I might have the opportunity to rise again. I'm fortunate that I retain one of my home centers, Constantinople, so if I ever get a single additional center, I'll also double my military force and regain the capacity to support myself into spaces, which is the difference maker between being a player and being a beggar. The only other interesting thing going now is that move into Paris. I can't help wondering if Slim and Patton are going to be fighting again now, as they were in the beginning. In fall, Nimitz walks into Belgium. It looks like I spoke a little too soon about him being finished. On the bright side, he's a dead power in all but actual centers, a step below me, because there's no one who wants to keep Nimitz alive nearby him. Patton and Slim still aren't really fighting, so I guess the Paris move was agreed on, or they've made up very quickly. On the very bright side, Ataturk and Haig's moves show they're definitely squaring off for a fight. My opportunity may yet come. Then, in spring 1909, disaster strikes. Nothing actually happens to me, but Haig tried to move into Constantinople instead of supporting it to hold. Fortunately, Patton still supports me rather than helping him get another dot. Still, this may indicate that my days are numbered. If Haig sees me as just a morsel to be gobbled, my comeback will definitely not happen. Patton only has the one unit in the region, so he can't rebuild the Foch Empire on his own. In the center, Patton appears to be joining Ataturk in attacking Haig, while Slim and Patton move toward Nimitz to finish him off. Altogether not a great season for me, although I have only limited interest in the events outside my little sphere. In fall 1909, Slim and Patton finish Nimitz off, and Slim jumps into the attack on Haig. It seems this three-power alliance may win the game at this point. Haig can't fight the whole world alone, and Slim and Patton, at least, have been remarkably good at sticking together through thick and thin. In the southeast, Haig takes Vienna, but it's clearly a temporary victory, as the space is surrounded by Patton's and Ataturk's units. Haig also loses Prussia to Patton at the same time. Haig makes another unsuccessful attempt to take Constantinople from me, and I get Patton's support again. In spring 1910, my situation reverses. Patton tries to walk into Constantinople, while Haig supports me holding. He seems to get now that I am part of his line of defense. Ataturk and Haig continue to struggle, with Haig still losing some ground to Patton, who's coming to help Ataturk. But Haig is holding his own remarkably well so far. In fall 1910, Haig's solid run of defense collapses, though. He loses Denmark, Vienna, Budapest, and Romania this year, which might mean he's out of luck. Slim, Patton, and Ataturk are operating as a well-oiled machine right now. I have the somewhat surreal experience of being supported in Constantinople this season by both sides of the fight. Ataturk, my enemy since the beginning, supports me along with Patton and Haig. I felt surprisingly secure at this moment, considering that I was a one-center power. In spring 1911, another disaster occurs. Haig NMRs. Ataturk successfully supports Patton into Bulgaria, despite my support for Bulgaria holding. And, just as concerning, Patton now tries to move into Constantinople. The move is unsupported, for whatever reason, but since Ataturk and Patton have me surrounded now, it's clearly a harbinger of doom. It's obvious from the pattern of the game that Haig's NMR is probably going to kill me. Fall 1911, my prediction comes true, and my run of luck is at last at an end. I lasted longer than Nimitz, at least. Once I'm gone, Ataturk proposes a draw including himself, Patton, and Slim, and Haig accepts, even though he's cut out, since he sees that he'll inevitably be eliminated anyway unless their solidarity breaks down, which it's shown no signs of doing. Plus, how could he possibly hold out without me? In retrospect, the most impressive and interesting points of the game were that Slim and Patton, who seemed to be locked in a life-and-death struggle from the beginning, managed to team up and go on to join the winner's circle in the end, becoming two of the most solid allies in this game, and that Nimitz, who started off growing so quickly, managed to flame out so spectacularly after his appetite grew too large and distributed for him to manage. Of course, the main lesson of this game, in my eyes, is the power of alliance play. We've talked about this before. As soon as Patton, Slim, and Ataturk agreed on collaborating, they were unstoppable, even though they weren't optimally positioned for working together at first, since they were entangled with each other, and since Ataturk was relying on Nimitz, Slim and Patton's enemy, for a while. This is so frequently true of any three powers, of course. It's usually a pretty boring game if a three-power alliance emerges from the beginning, because if it's really committed, it'll just sweep up the board, or be answered by another alliance on the other side of the board, and then it will become a long-term stalemate. Here, though, where the alliance did not emerge until the mid-game, it was rather exciting for me to observe what happened. So that was my experience of a game using the escalation rules. Obviously, it did not go as planned, considering a draw was concluded right after the other players killed me off, but it was still a wild and interesting ride while it lasted. I would definitely play this version of Diplomacy again, and since it involves reformulating where your home centers are, I think it would be frankly the best way for someone who got tired of the classic map to revive their interest. Just like playing in Age of Empires, you can create nations that only exist in history books, or more likely create nations that never existed using the power of imagination, which is a pretty exciting prospect. I hope you folks enjoyed the commentary. If you did, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, and comment below. Tell me about whether you'd be interested in trying the Escalation game sometime yourself. I think it's pretty cool. And if you really liked the video, consider joining the Patreon or writing subtitle translations, like the people whose names now appear on screen. We have a new patron now who wasn't around when I was making my last video, so please give a warm welcome to Alex. And until next time, Florida Man out.